Have you ever watched someone sit completely still, in total silence, for what feels like an impossibly long time, and wondered what's happening inside them? No phone, no music, no fidgeting, no distraction, just stillness. Most people would feel the urge to reach for something within 30 seconds. Their skin would start to crawl. The quiet would become unbearable. But some people sit in that silence like it's the only place they've ever truly felt at home. And today, I want to talk about what's really going on inside those people. Because the answer is far more complex than you might think. Let's start with something honest. Think about the last time you were alone in a room with absolutely nothing to do. No task waiting. No notification pulling at you. No show playing in the background. Just you and the quiet. How long did it last before you reached for your phone? Before you turned on some noise, any noise, just to fill the space? If you're being truthful with yourself, it probably wasn't very long. And you're not alone in that. There was a famous study at the University of Virginia where researchers left participants alone in a room for just 6 to 15 minutes with nothing but their own thoughts. The only other option was a button that would deliver a mild electric shock. And here's the unsettling part. A significant number of people chose to shock themselves rather than sit quietly with their own minds. Some did it multiple times. Let that land for a moment. We live in a world that has made silence feel like an emergency. Stillness feels like something's wrong. If you're not consuming, producing, responding, scrolling, then what are you even doing? That's the unconscious question most of us carry. We've been trained, slowly and deeply, to associate silence with emptiness. And emptiness with failure, with loneliness, with something broken. So when you see someone who can sit in complete silence for hours, genuinely at peace, not restless, not avoiding life, but simply still, it can feel almost alien. You might admire it. You might find it unsettling. You might even feel a little envious without knowing why. But what most people don't realize is that the ability to sit in silence isn't really about discipline. It's not about willpower or meditation practice or being some kind of enlightened soul. It's about something much deeper than that. Here's what psychology actually tells us about people who are comfortable in prolonged silence. The first thing to understand is that their relationship with their own inner world is fundamentally different from most people's. For many of us, the mind is not a safe place to be alone with. When the noise stops, what rushes in? Regret, anxiety, self-criticism, that thing you said 3 years ago that still makes your chest tighten, the uncertainty about your future, the grief you haven't processed, the version of yourself you're afraid you really are. Silence doesn't create those thoughts. It reveals them. And that's what makes it so terrifying for so many people. The noise was never the comfort. It was the shield. But people who can sit in total silence for hours, at some point in their lives, consciously or not, they stopped running from what the quiet reveals. They turned around. They sat down with it. And over time, something shifted. Psychologists describe this through a concept called distress tolerance, the ability to experience uncomfortable internal states without immediately trying to escape them. People with high distress tolerance don't necessarily feel less pain, less anxiety, or less discomfort. They've simply developed a different relationship with those feelings. They've learned that an uncomfortable emotion is not a threat. It's information. It's movement. It's weather passing through, not a permanent sky. But there's another layer here, and it's one that's rarely talked about. Many people who are deeply comfortable in silence have arrived there through suffering. Not always, but often. They've been through periods of intense overwhelm, emotional pain, loss, burnout, isolation, where the world became too loud, too much, too fast. And in that overwhelm, silence became the only place that didn't demand something from them. It became refuge. So what looks like peace from the outside? Sometimes it is peace, but sometimes it's the scar tissue of someone who learned that the quietest room is the safest room. Someone who discovered that when everything else was stripped away, the silence was the one thing that never hurt them. And that brings us to something really important, because not all silence is the same. There is a silence that comes from wholeness. A person so grounded in who they are that they don't need external stimulation to feel real. They are genuinely nourished by stillness. Their inner world is rich, textured, full of thought and wonder and a kind of quiet aliveness. And then there is a silence that comes from withdrawal. A person who has been so overwhelmed, so overstimulated, so emotionally depleted, that silence becomes the only way to survive. Not thriving in the quiet, but hiding in it. From the outside, these two people look exactly the same. So here's where the shift happens. Here's where we stop looking at these people from the outside and start asking a braver question. Which kind of silence is yours? Because if you're watching this video, chances are you recognize yourself somewhere in this conversation. Maybe you're someone who craves silence. Maybe you feel most like yourself when the world goes quiet. Or maybe you've been told you're too quiet, too withdrawn, too in your head, and you've spent years wondering if something is wrong with you. The ability to be alone with your own mind, truly alone, without distraction, without performance, without numbing, is one of the rarest psychological capacities a human being can develop. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott called it the capacity to be alone, and he considered it one of the most important signs of emotional maturity. Not the ability to be alone out of fear of others, but the ability to be alone because your internal world is stable enough, secure enough to hold you. Think about what that actually requires. It requires that at some point, you felt safe enough with a caregiver, a friend, a partner, or even just within yourself, that you internalized a sense of, I am okay without external validation in this moment. You learned that you could exist without performing your existence for someone else. That your worth didn't depend on being seen, producing, or responding to the world every waking second. That's not emptiness. That's an extraordinary kind of fullness. But here's the turning point that I really want you to hear. If your silence feels heavy, if it feels like a place you go because the world is too much, because people have taken too much, because you don't trust what will happen if you let the noise back in, then your silence isn't peace. It's protection. And protection, while necessary for a time, is not the same as healing. The difference between someone who sits in silence and is nourished by it, and someone who sits in silence because they are hiding from the world is not what it looks like. It's what it feels like from the inside. One feels like expansion, like the world gets bigger in the quiet, like thoughts move freely, like creativity breathes, like you are more of yourself in the stillness. The other feels like contraction, like you're pulling inward not because you want to, but because it's the only option that doesn't cost you something. Like the silence is a locked door, and you're not sure anymore whether you're keeping the world out or keeping yourself in. And both are valid. Both are human. Both deserve compassion. But only one of them is sustainable. If you are someone who finds genuine peace in silence, the first thing I want to say is, protect that. The world will try to fill your quiet. People will mistake your stillness for disengagement. They'll call you antisocial or detached or hard to read. But what you have, that ability to exist fully in the present without reaching for something to fill it, that is not a flaw. It's a depth that most people are quietly desperate to find in themselves. You don't owe anyone your noise. But if you recognize that your silence has become a hiding place, if the stillness that once protected you has started to isolate you, then the bravest thing you can do is not to force yourself back into the noise. It's to let one person into the quiet with you. That's the real turning point. Not filling the silence, not abandoning it, but learning that silence can be shared, that you can be still with another person and not lose yourself, that letting someone sit beside you in the quiet doesn't mean the quiet is gone. Psychologically, this is one of the most profound experiences a human being can have. Winnicott wrote about this too, the ability to be alone in the presence of another. It's the foundation of secure attachment. It's what we needed as children and what we still need as adults. Not someone who fills every silence, but someone who makes the silence feel less like solitude and more like companionship. You don't have to choose between your quiet and the world. You just have to find the people who know how to sit in it with you. So the next time you see someone sitting in total silence, still, unbothered, seemingly untouched by the chaos around them, don't assume they have nothing going on inside. The truth is usually the opposite. They may be the ones who feel everything so deeply that they had to build an entire cathedral of stillness just to hold it all. And maybe the reason you notice them in the first place is because some part of you is looking for that same quiet in yourself. Don't be afraid of it. The silence was never the enemy. It was always the invitation. If this felt like something you needed to hear today, I'd love for you to leave a quiet like on this video. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this one. And if someone in your life lives in the silence, maybe send this to them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to someone is, "I see you," even in the quiet. I'll see you in the next one.